When I was in college is I think when I realized that, we have to have examples, like to just wave a sign or write letters, like that's okay. But if we want to really make change, we have to make places that are examples of a better way. And they have to be fun places and beautiful places and inspiring places. We can't admonish people into or shame people into doing anything better. We just have to live a better way and be an inspiration, be an example of a better way that I think people want.
Welcome to the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast, a show about human environments and how they can be used as a force for good. Conversations that educate and inspire people looking for a different way to do real estate. I'm Neil Collins, and on the show today, how ecological designer Ben Falk was driven by his desire to not just spend weekends in nature, but create a homestead immersed in it. He is the founder of Whole System Design LLC, which offers ecological-based design services across the northeastern part of the United States. Ben Falk is a big name in the ecological design world. He wears many hats and is a designer, builder, instructor, and author. Early on in his career, he was inspired by the work of people like Bill Mollison and John Todd, and others that are credited as the figureheads of the permaculture and ecological landscaping movements. Ben was raised in a suburban neighborhood and found himself as a young adult compelled towards the backcountry. Over time, he became attracted to living more in alignment with his values and purchased land in Vermont's Mad River Valley. He then set about creating his own homestead, which became his launching pad into the professional design world. His homestead is a true testament to what is possible, and people have sojourned there from across the globe. He is the author of The Resilient Farm and Homestead and is cited across the internet in permaculture literature. I recently sat down with Ben to talk about how he sees the evolution of his career and the work that they pursue, and the general permaculture movement itself. Before we get back into the episode, I want to share something incredibly exciting with you. For the first time ever, there's going to be a regenerative real estate gathering at the end of the summer at the one and only Riverbend Farm in Saco, Maine. Now, I'd call it a conference, but that would definitely be doing it injustice, as the gathering at the world-famous Riverbend Farm will be like no other conference you have attended. This place may sound familiar to you if you tuned into the episode I did with Drew Dumpsch in June of 2021. You see, Drew is the founder and the executive director of the Ecology School, which is housed at the bucolic 105-acre working Riverbend Farm. Not only will we enjoy the company of incredible visionaries and professionals, but the environment itself will blow you away. You see, the farm was designed as one of the world's first Living Community Challenge projects that is put out by the International Living Future Institute. This rigorous building certification goes beyond the Living Building Challenge and is the perfect setting to not just talk about how we can transform the real estate industry, but what it looks like, tastes like, and feels like in real life. So join us August 24th through the 27th and get to know the people behind this regenerative movement. These are the professionals that are part of the transformation of the way we inhabit this planet. They are designers and developers, consultants and lenders, and the ones that are shaping the future of how we design, build, transact, and steward land and place. During this time, you'll learn firsthand about the world's most innovative real estate projects, such as living buildings and living communities. You'll be able to swap strategies and get insights about funding sources that are looking to spur regenerative real estate projects. You'll be able to connect with regenerative practitioners that are revolutionizing the real estate industry by demonstrating that real estate can be used as a force for good. This is the time that we need leaders and co-creators like yourself, now more than ever. This is not an event that you're going to want to miss, and it'll be such a small investment that has truly a lifetime of value. You can learn more by visiting Latitude's journal at chooselatitude.com/journal to search for the event. Early bird pricing ends June 24th. I hope to see you there. Ben, why don't we start off with the podcast, and can you just give an introduction of where you came from and your background and how you got into this work?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Western New York State, came to Vermont and 20 some odd years ago, and found ecological design through John Todd as a professor at UVM back around then, a little after, and then permaculture. I was kind of going to sleep in trees and try to save redwoods and stuff that way. And not that I think that's great stuff too, but when I found ecological design, I realized I could be part of solutions, not just resisting and fighting the problems, although I think that's important too. I realized my role might be to come up with solutions so we don't have to keep fighting and resisting all of the problems. Not that that's changed the trajectory of the world by any means, but it's been nice to be working on creating a lot of solutions, at least in my own local, looking out the window at my garden right now, and, at least right here, and hopefully inspiring other people to be able to engage in that way too. And, become producers and become beneficial members of our ecosystem, which is certainly very accessible to many people.
I see a lot of people that they'll get their permaculture design certificate and they think that they are now a landscape designer. But it sounds like, from my reading, you went a different route where you really applied this on your own property. Mm-hmm. How did that come together?
Well, I was lucky to be able to get on land when I was about 25. As I was going to grad school for architecture, which I subsequently quit pretty quickly and went to grad school for landscape architecture. And that I knew I had to practice it if I was going to learn how to do it myself anyway. And then if I was going to secondarily offer value to others in how to do this stuff, I needed to be doing more than just studying it in books or watching videos, but living it every day, working with the plants and the systems. And then it became my landscape that I was living in became a showroom, so to speak. If I really want to explain to clients kind of what we can offer, the best thing is for them to come here and just walk around, because here's the reality, of what things can look like, what things can be, how you can have food and medicine and systems working in synergy. Not that it's going to look the same anywhere else, but this the kinds of systems that are in place.
That initial vision, do you think that you're able to move and call forth that vision, or has it really meandered over the years?
Well, I think it's been, when I was in college is I think when I realized that, we have to have examples. It's enough to just try to convince people of an idea or wave a sign or write letters. That's okay. But if we want to really make change, we have to have places, we have to make places that are examples of a better way. And they have to be fun places and beautiful places and inspiring places. We can't admonish people into or shame people into doing anything better. We just have to live a better way and be an inspiration, be an example of a better way that I think people want, that they find attractive. So that's always, I guess I always have for a long time felt that way, and also just felt like I know I want my life that way. I mean, I don't have, in some ways, the self-discipline to like live what to me is a crappy existence, which is like commuting to an office every day. Not that that's not super cool for people who like that. That's awesome if that's what people want, but that's, to me, that's like hellish. So I knew I didn't want that. And how do I craft a lifestyle that's not that, that's outside, hands-on? And I know a lot of people, also feel like I do. So, the lifestyle itself, in large part, has also become what people are after, which I think is great. It's a very empowering, way to live, just to be on land and working with land every day. Um, Not necessarily everyone, can do that. And I feel very fortunate, but a lot of people can do, a lot of parts of it. And not everyone wants to, and that's cool too. But, many people do want to, who feel very forced, into the kind of modern industrial system, which is be a cog in a wheel for a larger company, and, you know, going to sit at a desk every day and do a lot of things that really don't help enhance a lot of vitality for people or places.
And what's interesting about this story is like there's a lot of people that want to live closer to the land, to be earth tenders that are really into permaculture, but they haven't seemed to really have this meteoric rise where your name comes up all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've got a book, but I was reading an introduction to a book just the other day, and like there's your name. At what point was it like this is the direction that your career was going in? Like, why do you think that you were getting so much attention for the work that you were doing?
I mean, it's a good question, because I don't think that I'm bringing anything terribly novel to the situation. I haven't invented something, but I think I've been in the right place at the right time to some extent. I was once walking around on my property with a guy who is older than me, and I don't need to mention his name, but he's brilliant and done a lot for permaculture. And he said something like, "Yeah, I was like 10 years too soon on this." And I think there's some truth to that. And the world wasn't always ready for these messages and these examples, and also maybe didn't have the medium of like the internet and everything, all the things in place that may have been needed for things to get somewhat popularized. I don't know. I think that's a big one. I think I can relate to maybe a lot of regular old people. I mean, I kind of like to do a lot of different things. Like, I'm not a total plant nerd. There's just so many people out there who know way more about plants than me. I'm not really super specialized in any one part, but I like to do all aspects of the homestead land management thing. And then I also went to grad school for landscape design. So I think having the professional practice background, I felt was important, and I think it has proven true. But the big thing is just living it, just trying to living in your example of what you think is possible. It's surprising more people don't do that, but it does take a while. We didn't start teaching permaculture courses until I was on our original site for like 7 years, where there was like really something to see and be a part of. So that there's a rollout time to have something substantial with living systems, because you can throw millions of dollars at a piece of land. You're not going to be like eating food off that landscape, but from trees anyway, for 4, 5, 6, 10 years, no matter how many resources you throw at the site. Things just take a certain amount of time to grow. So it does take a little bit of time to get places up and running. But there's plenty of people with amazing places out there that no one knows about. And, they don't spend any time like shouting about it like I have and some other people have. So that might be one part. I'm kind of maybe a loudmouth about it and trying to share it.
How do you think the development of this buzz in the field, like, are you glad that it's been developed to where maybe we could call it becoming more mainstream? Certainly not in the application in across all landscapes. But do you think that it's gone in a healthy direction where more people are starting to really understand the principles behind ecological design?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I don't think it's still that popular at all. I mean, I think in a very small world that permaculture is like known, but I don't think there's much literacy out there across the board. Even people have heard about permaculture or like now hear the word regenerative, regeneration. That's getting to be, I think, kind of viral. I don't think a lot of people really understand what that means from a principle understanding, and really, what it means to regenerate a place. There's basic principles of regeneration or permaculture. So I don't know. I think it's kind of popular, but I think there's also just not a whole lot of fluency, in our culture still at all around these things. But I'm happy, the more people know of permaculture and regenerative design, and the better, I think. It's I hope it doesn't just become a fad thing, of course, and stamp regenerative ag on a product and then people are like, cool, that's the next organic, and buy it and feel good about that. I mean, unless it's real, it's easy to just make it all into a greenwashed thing, which I'm sure it will. I mean, it is being greenwashed, I think. And that maybe is unavoidable, but I don't know. Yeah, the more people know about these fields and ways of engaging that can do good and not just do less bad, I think the better. I've heard in Australia, permaculture is very, very much mainstream. Like there's permaculture curriculum in like public schools, and that seems great. That would be great if that happens in this country, I think.
What are those regenerative principles that and patterns that you really want to take hold? Like if everything was to go right, like what kind of literacy and really foundation do you think people should be standing upon?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of them, but some of the primary ones I think of is an understanding that you're a participant in the ecosystem in the world, whether or not you think you're a user of the earth of this place, and you require food and water and lives to live. No one's here without requiring needs. As long as we eat, we're taking from the system. And so it's all about reciprocation. We can give back to the system too, but we can't not take. Sometimes there's this, I don't want to pick on veganism, but this kind of understanding of like, we can really not have an impact. We can be like, leave no footprints, in the wilderness world, like leave no trace, and that's just hypothetical. That doesn't exist. Like we all leave footprints, we all take to live in the world. So that's a big one, that we require resources. And so we have to, reciprocate and put back, because we do take. How do we put back? Can we cycle our fertility? Can we not, send our urine and our feces into the nearest ocean, as waste? Can we cycle resources on site, build soil, plant, can we provide for some of our needs, get a yield, being a primary permaculture principle? Can we not just conserve, but can we get a yield? Can we produce some of what we need? Because if we don't, we're asking someone else to. And usually that's not in as nearly of a responsible way as it can be done if it's localized and we're a part of it. I'd say, all of the primary permaculture principles are baseline, care of the earth, care of people, and return of surplus. If you have extra, return it to your neighbors, your community. Those are really baseline. The basic understanding of what regeneration is. In my book, I have one definition. There's a lot of definitions out there, but just, any impact that's building biodiversity and biomass is regenerative. If it's not, it's not so regenerative. Some baseline understandings like that.
I had a conversation with Andrew Faust that really brought in permaculture to looking at the systems design of major cities like New York City.
Mm.
And it was pretty mind-blowing to see, like, okay, this is how this one person is really applying these sets of principles to an urban system. But it sounds like you've really gravitated more towards land revitalization. Is that really the niche that your clients are coming to you for, of just like larger projects, or are you really across all different landscape and client types?
We've worked at, all different scales, from like a town, like village scale to, pretty like municipal scales, small cities, worked on a prison project, like institutional, schools. But I would say where we've made the most difference are just on people's, individual property sites where they can really activate the designs, because when it's bigger and there's a lot of stakeholders and it's public or it's institutional, it's just, there's a lot of reasons that things don't get activated. We've made a lot of great plans that don't happen, whether it's permitting or people with various goals that want to do other things that don't have to do it with anything regenerative on site happening. So what we found is that it's the private landowners generally that are in a position sometimes to really make the ideas a reality. I stopped by one of our clients that we worked with starting more than almost 15 years ago the other day, and he's in his garden. I'm driving past and he's in his garden, and whenever I drive past his place, he's in his garden. And so his site's real, like he has tons of food. All of the planting plan we gave him years ago is now huge currant bushes and apples and pears and sea berries and everything, and compost system and pond and the system is real, and he's living in this beautiful food garden. But that's because he's out there doing it, and that's the problem. Is a lot of times, I'd say most of the time, it's you come up with great plans, but people really don't put the work in, on the land to make it real. I'm kind of excited about smaller projects in ways because they do tend to have a higher percentage chance of being real. Not that we don't get really excited about working with schools and town villages for sure, but it's just there's a lot more barriers for those to actually have a realistic, have realistic outcomes.
Do you think that's largely due to just time on site and the personal observation that comes with it, or there's not as many cooks in the kitchen? Or
yeah, it's a lot of things. Like, think about schools. So we've come up with all sorts of great plans for schools to have them have, different school campuses have edible elements and biodiversity increases, and agroforestry systems on their farms when they have farms, and just tons of reducing like lawnscapes and replacing them with foodscapes and getting kids outside involved in the food systems. And they're busy, they're already full. Like, they don't have room to add programming around this or get kids involved, with this, or retrain buildings and grounds crews to not just mow and blow, but to like mulch and prune fruit trees, for instance. It's like it takes a lot of different levels of change for that to be real. A plan by itself does nothing. And then even planting some of the systems out isn't successful unless the whole culture can shift to accommodate a different way of being, with the land. We're used to, most sites that the standard is, mow the grass and blow the leaves. Obviously total extractive, non-regenerative type of relationship. It takes a lot more skill to like take care of, 5, 10, 20 types of plants, know what they need, know when to harvest them and how to interact with them. And so that's exciting. There's a lot more learning and pedagogy that can happen, especially in a school setting. But these schools are already kind of like busy doing what they do, so it's hard to have something else, on the table.
Yeah, this is so interesting and so timely, because it's, in this post-COVID world that we're living in, it's almost like these urban areas are just breathing out but with it comes a lot of very ecologically illiterate people that their livelihoods are not tied to the land or to the region necessarily. It's tied to the digital sphere.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts on how you start to shift that culture so that people can not only tune in and understand what they're looking at, but actually to be a participant, to start to have agency in that shift?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really feel like I have too many answers on this front. I mean, I think people are just, most people do spend so much more time like on their computer and online than, in with the landscape. And that's kind of the type one part of the problem. I mean, um, how to shift that obviously is a massive conversation. I don't think anything too new to add to that. Yeah, most folks I think are just so entertained or involved in the virtual space and not, with the physical place they live in that much. So it's tough. I mean, I was just going to mention that we have one of the projects we did, which was somewhat successful, like It's Real, also has this very interesting learning to it because it's a town piece of public land where we designed an orchard, and then the town raised money and we helped with it and made a design, and we did a planting for an orchard, and someone helped to give a discount on the plants, a local nursery. We planted it as a workshop and people came and it was awesome. And the trees got maintained and pruned to some extent. And they're now big and they're bearing apples and pears like every year. It's awesome. It's real, but like almost no one shows up. Like I've been there harvesting basically every year and I've never seen a person from the village. It's right in the village there, picking free fruit. It's like, here's all this free food. Like, this is real. It worked. It's great. It's a success, but no one shows up really. I mean, a few people do, but I've never seen any of them. Not many do. And a lot of fruit falling on the ground. And so it is, I think people are just busy. And this is a place where people are maybe more involved with their place and their landscape than in a lot of places. This is a rural town. And it's still like, people kind of know of it, but no one thinks to go out there and get really great apples and pears. And why that is, I don't necessarily know, but I think people are busy. They're wrapped up in in their indoor world. I mean, your average person just isn't outside much. They drive around, and people are in their houses way more than they're outside in their yard and interacting with the living world. That's a tough one. I mean, we're going more and more in that direction every year, it seems, so far. I don't know when it's going to hit a peak and we're going to bottom out, so to speak, on that virtual relationship, but hopefully soon.
Yeah, hopefully so. I find it really interesting. Like we see a lot of different development projects come our way, and more developers are saying, "Look, we want to incorporate like an agri-hood," and some seem to really, I don't hit the mark in a sense. Like they're really seeking the kind of designers and practitioners that can help them, and then others have these real glitzy versions of like tall greenhouses and vertical agriculture. And it just, I'm not sure what it is outside of, there's something that doesn't quite sit right. Mainly it seems like a more of a marketing appeal. What kind of clients do you see starting to really percolate up that might have been different than 10 years ago? Do you get these same kind of calls and with these really aspirational visions?
Yeah, I mean, it's a wide variety. We have a great client who's doing a multi dozens of units in housing, somewhat affordable, totally net zero, with like food as central, and it's like basically like condo development. It's dense, and that's really cool. And the people who are going to live there, I think it's there's a lot of interest, and the people who want to live there, want food, want to engage. So there's some examples of this, but yeah, it's few and far between. I mean, we're seeing clients come our way that are, pretty diverse: schools, library, a lot of private clients have always been a bit of a backbone, like private landscape design, food system design, rural, like farm redevelopments, agritouristic, some for sure. Although I think that's finally slowing down, like the, kind of farm with events kind of idea, hospitality, that was big for a bunch of years. And now that I think is maybe peaking out. I think the mainstay that's just always been interest and is more than ever now is people who want to be closer to their food, move to a more rural area and have like, a serious garden / small farm, but they're not going to be farmers. They have another monetary livelihood, but they want to spend a bit of their time as much as possible, engaged in their landscape in a productive way.
Are you working with those kind of clients just throughout the Northeast, or are you working across the country or the world?
Mostly the Northeast, but all around we've worked with these projects and continue to all around the country, West Coast, Midwest, quite a few.
How do you handle those kinds of jobs that might be across country?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you have that literacy of that bioregion, or do you bring in local folks?
The good question. No, we don't often have enough literacy, with a specific ecological context to come up with, let's say, plant lists. So we've hired. We'll engage with like local people. We had a project we worked a lot on near Palo Alto, California, and we hired a plant guy in that area to help us complete a plant list. And also design, to look things over and make sure, hey, this, fire is a big issue on that site versus in New England, it's not. So they have to get vetted and checked for like local pressures that are very site specific and locale specific.
Oh wow! And where would you like whole system design to go? Do you have an aspirations for the company? I know that you've also got the collective,
right?
What do you see for the future coming up?
Yeah, and when I speak of these design projects, I'm talking about the collective. That's all like one body of work. Personally, I mean, my aspirations are always to have it go to more like public spaces and schools, like educational settings, but at the same time, as I've said, they're really hard to make actual change in. So, ultimately, I mean, my biggest aspiration is just to continue to make the places that I manage, the 2 land bases I manage myself, like as awesome as possible, because I can do a lot about that.
What does that look like right now with those two land bases? How about just a broad, vivid stroke picture of like how does your homestead look for a visitor that would be coming for the first time?
Yeah, well, it's right now we have a lot of animals on our main homestead farm. We have cows and chickens, and we have a guy who's helping us do a lot of animal systems here. We've always on and off over the years had sheep and ducks and some other animals, but tree systems have been a big push in the last 10 years on our second site that we manage. So there's a lot of agroforestry hedgerows, there's a lot of water systems, veggie garden systems. And then lately, we've been kind of layering in a lot of different animal systems. It's just a small farm and homestead. It's nothing, I think, terribly exciting, but it's what I spend a lot of my time engaged with, and where I learn a lot from. When we do our permaculture courses, people come here and they see a lot of systems that are integrated. I don't think any one of the veggie systems we do, or the animal systems, or the agroforestry tree crop systems, or the pond systems, although those are pretty innovative, none of them by themselves are, anything particularly like earth-shattering, but they're integrated. And that, I think, is what means a lot to a lot of people, to see working together.
So what's next? Do you have another book coming out? Is that
or I'm going to have a revision coming out, and so it's going to be this coming winter, late winter, probably, that it would be out. And it'll just be an update because it's been 10, I guess it'll have been about 10 years. So there's a bunch of stuff that's not in the old book, like a lot of greenhouse systems that we've tried, high performance greenhouses, cheap bow frame greenhouses, cold frame systems, that'll be in there. A lot on tool management and organization and like workspace pieces of the system, because that's just huge for the effectiveness of a home and farm. Workspace, how workspace is organized and designed and integrated, and a whole bunch of other stuff in there. A lot of updates on different species and how they've done over time. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you have a lot going on. You definitely sounds like you've thrown a lot of spaghetti at the wall to see what works and what doesn't work. And it's unbelievable to see how you have really pushed this narrative out to, it seems like a much wider audience now, more so than ever, especially 10 years ago, from whenever your original book came out. So it's just a pleasure to watch somebody like you really develop this whole field. And I can only imagine what it's going to be like in 10 more years.
Yeah. Well, thanks. That's hopeful for me to hear, because, obviously you don't, when you're in it, you don't see it as a third party and have a clarity of view that maybe someone else has of what it looks like out there and how it's being received. But, yeah, I'm just excited for people to be able to come to these places where these systems are happening and see like a fantastic world to live in, and want to help create those for themselves and in the places that they live with their neighbors. And we can do that in millions and millions and millions of places.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate your time for coming on.
Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the show today. If you want to follow our work at Latitude, you can follow us on Instagram at latitude.regenerative.re, and mine is at I am Neil Collins. We inherently believe in the potential that comes from connecting value-aligned and purpose-driven people together in community. That's why I encourage you to join our mighty network and introduce yourself to the other people working across the globe to advance a more regenerative, resilient, and beautiful world. Here, we want to know what you're working on and what inspires you. Through this platform, you can attend live events, take courses provided by our podcast guests, and create connection with other people and businesses that share your same passion. To join, find the link in our show notes or visit our website at chooselatitude.com. If you'd like to support the show, please share it with your friends and be sure to follow us on your podcast app so that you always have the latest episode downloaded. Another way to support our regenerative field building is to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Positive ratings help attract amazing guests, and they can be the deciding factor for someone else to tune in and listen. And who knows, maybe this is the kind of motivation that it takes for them to finally decide to align their profession with their sustainable and regenerative values and become a positive force for good within their own community. This show was produced by myself and edited by Anthony Wallace and offered as a part of our work with Latitude Regenerative Real Estate.